I'm Dr. Emily Friedman, and this course is in actual play, tabletop role playing, its past, its present, and its future. This course is offered at Auburn University out of the Honors College as a research seminar. And so it's active learning at its very best, which is to say, it is structured such that over the course of the semester, there's going to be fewer and fewer constraints put on by me and more guided by the student interest, which is what we talked about today on this first day of class, a day with perfect attendance. So this video is primarily designed for the educators and those who are curious about how tabletop role-playing games are taught in higher ed. Welcome. We start off, as I realize I need to start off just about every class that involves tabletop role-playing, which is with one of my very favorite role-playing games, For the Queen by Alex Roberts. It's a small card-based game that can take as little as 20 minutes to play. Everything you need is in the box. The instructions are taught as part of the process of play. Literally, the only thing that I need to do as preparation is to tell them that when they need to place the Queen is under attack card into the shuffled stack, that they should count, depending on the class length, 15 to 20 cards deep. We went with 20 this time, which I think was just a little too long. I would continue to recommend 15 cards. I would also recommend making sure that your tables are as equal in number as possible. I have 15 students, and so it's fairly easy to have 3 tables of 5. It went really well, less violently than last time, last fall, but it's a great way to both do icebreakers of students who may or may not know each other, as well as introduce the initial concepts of role-playing games to students without having to do character creation or a whole bunch of mechanics. At their heart, role-playing games are storytelling experiences done by an individual or a collective with some kind of constraint. In this case, the randomized prompts of the questions in the deck and the selection of queens, which will flavor the ways in which people answer the questions that are put to them. It also allows me to introduce a safety tool, the X card, which is a useful initial starting point to talk about the larger landscape of safety tools, which we will get into, and of course, which were linked to students both before class and as part of the readings and for further exploration for later on. What Kiana and Lauren have compiled in the tabletop role-playing game safety toolkit is amazing. I also link to Script Change, another set of tools, as well as collectives of tools that are available on itch.io. We did have some variation in terms of when the actual playing of For the Queen finished. And so I also had up on our shared screen both an itch.io listing of Descended from the Queen games, as well as the forthequeengame.com website, which also includes information about the Descended from the Queen SRD, which allows for people to use the core rule set to make games of their own. I am, in fact, doing that as part of my Austin class, which I'll talk about in another recap video coming on Thursday, or maybe Friday. Thursday's a really long day in my world. The point is that while the last table was finishing up, the other 2 tables were able to get in their phone or their tablet or their laptop or just look at the screen and take a look and investigate all the ways in which this very simple mechanic of prompt questions around a central concept has been used to tell all kinds of different stories. It's also a useful way as we transition away from initial gameplay into the discussion of the features of this class, which is to say the obligatory talking about the syllabus, to talk about the unessay, which is the beating heart of many of my courses. This is a concept I take from my good friend and colleague Ryan Cordell, who has documented this really robustly. The unessay is designed to be a research task and product that does not necessarily conform to what we think of as formal writing in the traditional format, but shows all of the same kinds of demonstrations of thoughtful preparation and scaffolded tasks and what have ye. But the final product can look like a lot of things. It can look like a version of a game with documentation. As one student immediately asked when I asked if there were any more questions, yes, you can write an entire campaign and run it as one of your unessays. I suspect I'll be seeing that soon. The other features of this class that are perhaps unusual for some folks is that it takes a page from people like Jessie Stoffel and Kate Osmond and thinks about a grading contract rather than weighting particular tasks with particular point values. Instead, the student and the professor come together at near the beginning of the semester and then reevaluate at the middle of the semester the labor that they will do in exchange for the grade they wish to earn. More tasks completed equals a higher grade, with a kind of baseline collective expectation in terms of reading, participation, and what have you. So at the end of next week, students will submit that initial grade contract just so that I can get a sense of how they're prioritizing this course. This is an honors version of the course, so unlike last time where I had a kind of wide range of contracted grades, I suspect most people will be trying to contract for an A. In this class, the expectation is that students will do all of the reading in order to get an A, take one kind of brain fog day. I'm taking this concept from Kate Osmond, where they still need to come to class, but they cannot be prepared with the reading because their just brains exploded, and a certain number of tasks. This is a research seminar, which means that students are getting hands-on experience in research, in this case, how to study actual play. So the core task that I'm having all students do is literally watch actual play and document it with certain kinds of qualitative observations. How long does the DM speak before a player starts speaking? What are the visual features if it's a visual actual play? What are the additional audio features? Is it edited or not edited? Is it live to tape? You get the idea. Most of these observations can be made by watching the first 20 to 30 minutes of an actual play. We're not doing observations of narrative content for these kinds of things, which allows for students to process more than if I was asking them to say, watch full episodes of Critical Role. That's the challenge, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about is most actual play is extremely long, and that's a real challenge. In order to mitigate that, these first encounters with actual play, as I walked students through the first weeks of class, are going to be comparatively short. Matthew Mercer's one-shot for Red Nose Day with Stephen Colbert runs a little over an hour and introduces both what Dungeons & Dragons is, but also what Dungeons & Dragons was in a fairly tight time frame. So that's the biggest task that students are being asked to do in week 1. There's also a complementary essay, a chronology of D&D that they'll read alongside it. Next week, the volume gets pumped up as we move through the history of, say, Acquisitions Incorporated in its many different formats. Luckily, many of those formats were comparatively short, but there is one kind of chunky boy at the end. And I'll talk about in future videos how I guide students to watch and what their watch in different kinds of ways as we move forward in order to give them as wide an experience of actual play as possible. But for today, it was primarily kind of giving them the keys to the kingdom in terms of the syllabus that's available on Canvas and kind of telling them what the principles of the course are. Another important component of doing that introduction is to say that, hey, look, between weeks 1 and week 6, I've got a plan. I've got a very specific plan. You can decide, how to organize your time on it. After that, I'm going to be taking my cues and building for you for the next several weeks after that, based on things that you've asked me to do and these sorts of things. And I tell them that partly that's just so that I can involve them in the creation of this course so that it can serve all the very different lenses that they are approaching. We've got everything from economists to biologists to psychologists to marketing folks and accounting folks to design folks. We've got a lot of folks to serve, and it's a very different composition of the class than it was last fall. Last fall, 3 students had played Dungeons and Dragons before. Now, most of the class has some experience with D&D. That alone is a huge game changer in terms of how folks can help, what people are bringing in terms of frames of reference, that sort of thing. Over half have watched some kind of actual play before. And of course, I did get some folks who caught my "how do you want to do this?" which is the final third of the course where students are largely independent, with me increasingly on the side as a coach, keeping them to their plan, their game plan for how they're going to execute their final projects. So that's the overall structure. The other reason I tell students, and I'm telling you, that I structure this course in this way is practical. I was extremely lucky last fall, kind of by accident, to have a bunch of luminaries from a variety of places in the tabletop role-playing world come and volunteer to visit my students virtually via Zoom. And we had the flexibility built in so that they could do that. It was fabulous, and I will never stop being grateful for the ways that transformed both the class as well as, frankly, my entire career. To do that this fall, I did make some initial asks in the first weeks. So Kate Welch, Jeff Stormer, and some more lovely humans are already booked to talk to my students in the first couple of weeks of the semester. But the further out you're asking someone to commit, especially when they are in a creative field and they are working from gig to gig, it becomes unreasonable to ask people, hey, can you know for sure that you're going to be available at 11 o'clock on a Thursday Central Time, in October? Their hard no's are absolutely known, but their yeses are much more conditional. It's much easier for me to, in week 6, contact folks that my students are interested in talking to and say, hey, can you come in sometime in the next couple of weeks? And as it happened last fall, sometimes that meant, can you come tomorrow? Or them saying, I can come tomorrow. So not planning and having a kind of flexible middle to end of the semester also means that I can build in for this kind of serendipity, which is a gift beyond price. So that's the other reason I don't know what my students are going to be interested in, and I want to give them as much as possible. I don't know who's going to be available when, and that becomes clearer the closer we get to any particular date. And also, the world of actual play, which is exciting and wonderful precisely because it is ever changing. If something new and thrilling is announced, say in October for World of Darkness's, October content, then I want to have the flexibility to say, hey guys, do we want to focus on this? Do we want to closely attend to this as part of our labor? Who knows? There's lots that's unknown at this particular moment in time, but I'm very excited and very enthusiastic and energized by this first day with this group of students who seem really engaged and lovely, and it was just, we hit the ground running. I had a few questions at the end about things like, so who do you know at Polygon, since I now write for them from time to time about tabletop role-playing games and actual play? And the answer was not the people that you want to talk to, but maybe we'll make that happen. Who knows? And also, some practical questions just about, how readings and books and things like that work. We'll do a lot of process work together. We will have our institutional research board officer will come and talk to us about qualitative research. We will talk to people whose articles we are reading, like Alex Chalk, to talk about actual methodologies and actual play, and what does it mean to use interview content in research and anonymizing and all that sort of thing. We're going to closely read scholarly pieces in this field and reverse engineer them to see how they work. And I think what's most exciting to me this time, because I'm not teaching an English class but teaching an honors class, and honors here is overwhelmingly non-humanities, is introducing humanistic methods of research to scientists, social scientists, and other folks outside of the humanities. It's really one of the most important things that I do, period. And so my deep hope, fingers crossed, is that students gain a new appreciation for the ways in which humanities research is conducted and how it helps us better understand the world around us. It's really much more interdisciplinary than anything else, but it is rooted in the notion and the scale of the human. And as I told students today, one of the enduring challenges that I'm eager and excited to share with them is an 18th centuryist going from teaching about the safely dead to learning alongside and writing about active, vibrant, and indeed quite living people. So that was day one of class, and I'm really excited for what comes next. On Thursday, we will talk about D&D. I pushed the D&D day off in the previous version of this class about as far as I could and realized it was a mistake. As much as I want to decenter the dragon from a consideration of tabletop role-playing games and actual play more specifically, the reality is that every piece of scholarship and functionally everyone who's in the conversation assumes you have some familiarity with D&D. So we just have to do it. This will not always be the dominant mode, and I'm very excited and have, as I showed students today, set Perusal, our collective reading space, up with many other game systems that they can explore and ask me to include more information about. Everything from Brindlewood Bay to Alice is Missing and a whole lot more. And I'm excited for the inclusion of those different ways of playing and thus those different ways of performing and viewing as we move forward. So yeah, feel free to follow me and my adventures on Twitter at FRIEDE. or feel free to ask questions in the comments here. Thank you so much for watching.